How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm Andrew Robson, a Deciduous Bonsai professional based out of my studio, RAKUYO Bonsai, here in Portland, Oregon. And my normal co-host, Maciek, is away this week, but I'm joined by a very special guest, my friend and the proprietor of Bonsai Forge in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Daniel Yobp. Daniel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Love to be here.
Yeah, of course. So we're going to talk about deciduous Yamadori, especially deciduous Yamadori on the East Coast. You're out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where you have the classical American deciduous woods that are so iconic. And we're talking about doing some collecting projects together in the future and your nursery. But tell me a little bit about Bonsai Forge. What you just started this new garden and business.
Yeah.
Tell me about Bonsai Forge.
Well, it kind of goes back to, I started bonsai many years ago and actually studied a little bit in Japan. And I always had this dream to build my own bonsai nursery. I worked out west quite a bit, traveled a lot, and couldn't have the opportunity to do that. But I moved back to Pittsburgh since, and I bought some property, 5 acres, and had some old, interesting buildings, and I thought it would make a really cool space for bonsai and having folks come from out of town to learn how to do bonsai. So it's a place I'd like visiting artists to come and people from the region to come to learn from those artists. And you came this last fall, which was awesome.
Yeah,
I
was very honored to come to, what was it, the launch of
it was the launch, yeah. It was the opening
ceremony of Bonsai Forge.
Yeah, it was great. We had music and we had food and
yeah, it just really what struck me too. I mean, you built an incredible place.
Thank you.
You have a really nice kind of epicenter for bonsai in the Pittsburgh area. But what struck me was like the people in Pittsburgh are just such wonderful people. There's all the students in the workshops that I did and the people who were there helping you. They were just fantastic people. So
it really is. It's a really thoughtful group of folks who are really passionate about bonsai, and I just love those guys, all those folks. So
yeah,
thank you for recognizing that. They're going to be happy to hear that.
Yeah, no, they're great. I can't wait to get back. And speaking of coming back. A project that we're working on together is, I'm a traveling teacher and I do these study groups all over North America, and we're starting a study group at Bonsai Forge, a deciduous bonsai study group.
Yeah.
With our first date, I forget what it is, sometime in March.
Yeah, it's like the second week of March, I think. I'll check that out.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking forward to coming out this March. And if you're in the Pennsylvania area and you want to learn about deciduous bonsai in a little bit of a more intense but fun way, it's going to be a great opportunity, a great little kind of learning center and hub for that. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it's great too because we have so many awesome species to work with out east, and actually species that aren't great to collect also out east. But you're the person that they need to talk to about that to figure out how to actually utilize them and not utilize them. So yeah, we're all looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be fun. Something that I thought was cool seeing your new space was you actually had several collected deciduous trees, which everybody thinks collected conifers, and you do that very well as well. You have some of the best Yamadori selection I've seen on the East Coast for junipers. What is it, Western and Sierra junipers?
Mostly Western junipers.
Okay. Yeah. But something that was fun to see for a deciduous person was in my workshop we worked on one, or maybe I demoed an American Beech. And so that you collected, you had a really cool American Elm, which was fun to see. Like, tell me about collecting deciduous trees on the East Coast. Like, what's been your experiences with that?
Well, I can't speak for the whole East Coast, of course. We're kind of, Pittsburgh's in a weird spot. It's like almost getting towards the Midwest, but that region, which I collect from, you find some of your really good stuff, and just like you would out west in conditions that aren't great for the trees. They're not thriving, but they're surviving. Yeah. And places like that are like shale hillsides. Pittsburgh's famous for having a bunch of shale everywhere.
Okay.
And so you get like these desolate areas where like few trees have grown out of, right? And they're kind of twisted and contorted quite a bit. And so those are great for stumping and starting.
Okay, so for stumping and starting, for someone who's listening to this who doesn't know what that means, does it look like a bonsai when you're collecting it, or are you talking about a big tree that you're only interested in the bottom 2-3 feet of?
I'm interested in the bottom 2-3 feet of, and it depends. It's it's kind of based on how fat the tree is to start with, of course. Really small twisted tree, I might chop down to only a foot. But a very fat, wide trunk, I might save 3 feet of it, perhaps. But yeah, I'm only looking for a trunk. The elm specifically that you mentioned, which has a very large base, I collected that essentially as I had a maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7 inch little branch coming off it, and I cut right down to that.
Okay. And this is American Elm, right?
This is an American Elm, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, American Elm. I collected out of the shale hillside. It took me about an hour with a digging bar basically to break the shale up enough to get us a root saw out to cut it back to just a few roots.
Yeah.
But it recovered wonderfully.
Okay.
American Elm I collect extremely well back east. I can't recall one that I've collected that's died.
Okay. So really
tough.
high survival rate when you
Very high survival rate. They're very tough. They take heat well. They take a lot of sun well. I took that tree specifically with me when I lived out in Idaho for a while, from Pittsburgh to Idaho, and for 3 years it survived 100+ degrees in the summertime.
Okay,
So
wow.
it's a very tough deciduous tree.
There's been some great examples of American Elm bonsai over the years. So we were talking earlier, Suthin in Massachusetts has a wonderful American Elm, kind of very classical broom style that he had, at National Show like 2 years ago?
I want to say it was 2 national shows ago. Yeah.
And it was just a really wonderful example of the species. It was done in a very kind of traditional context, but it was kind of superbly done in that way, and it was just a beautiful tree. And it's nice to see kind of some of our native trees applied in those similar contexts.
Absolutely, and what I was really impressed about that tree too, obviously, was the size of the leaves. He really got those leaves small, and maybe next national show when I see him, I can see if he can give me some tips.
Yeah.
I've gotten my leaves much smaller as well, but I haven't gotten quite that
So
small.
American Elm's one that I haven't worked on too much. Are the leaves bigger compared to most elms that were?
They're actually quite large. They can be up to like 2 inches when you first collect them.
Okay.
Long, ovate, obviously. But I've got them down to about an inch now.
Okay.
But I've seen them down to 3/4 to a half inch.
Yeah.
Very nice proportions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And elms are kind of known for getting smaller leaves and high levels of density. So those two things tend to go hand in hand. The more density you get, the more leaves you get. So I'm sure yours is on the way. But yeah, what a great species. When we say American elm, a lot of people think of like the Dutch American elm disease or whatever that was going around. Are these the same elms that were affected by that?
They still exist in the wild. They're still affected by that disease. But this tree I've had I collected that 2000, I want to say 13.
Okay.
And it's still going strong. No effects from that. And I believe it'd be easier to treat in a pot, of course.
Okay.
You can treat the soil, everything. Opposed in the ground, it's kind of harder to treat things once they get up there.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like in the forest, they're obviously not going to do a mass spraying or anything.
Yeah.
All these things tend to be a lot more manageable in a bonsai pot when you have someone meticulously caring for them.
Yeah.
So you said American elms, like the one that Suthin had was kind of a smaller, it's still a nice trunk, but a smaller trunk. Looked like he collected as a young plant and kind of grew for a decade or two. But the one you have is very much reminds me of some of the trees that are coming out of Croatia, like a really impressive, huge trunk with some movement and interest. Is that kind of common to find? Is that kind of a rarity?
For American elm, that kind of shape in the areas I've discussed, those kind of outcroppings of shaly hillsides, they will be contorted, and the bark will be very flaky, and the branching's kind of very unique to it. It's very twisted and winding. Other elms, other deciduous trees that I've collected, whether they are in that environment or in the forest, are not as contorted. So it seems very specific to that species in that environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more kind of crazy the environment, the more crazy the trees.
Yeah, for that species specifically.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah, you mentioned bark. That's another cool thing about that species. The other tree that we're going to talk about in a little bit, American Beech, is the polar opposite. But the cool thing about your elm is it's got a wonderful kind of craggly bark to it, which was really striking when I saw the tree in person.
The bark is just absolutely wonderful. absolutely wonderful. It's really a gift. I think people should collect them more, honestly. Find them more, collect them more, and work with them more. But there's just not a lot of work done with them. And I don't know if that's just us as a culture being attracted to other kind of species and you know, or what it is, but you just don't see them very often.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see more, and that's something that we're talking about doing together, is starting to get out in the woods and collect some deciduous trees. Maybe that's a good segue into talking about beech, which is kind of a species passion of mine. I have an American beech kind of sitting behind us that I've been working on for quite a few years. American beech, I think a lot of people have written off because, I mean, the Latin name is Fagus grandifolia, big leaf.
Yeah,
and,
right.
And it does have a larger leaf than Japanese beech or than European beech, but you know, me and Maciek have done a whole episode on leaf size and how it's, you know, as a deciduous artist, it's almost irrelevant to me, leaf size, because everything can reduce, you can ramify anything. But I think a lot of people have kind of shied away from American beech because it has such a big leaf. And in fact, you know, the tree that we did in the workshop there, some of the photos that you've showed me of some of the sites that you've scouted, there's some really, really interesting material. And you have this tree that's so iconic for bonsai in Japan. You know, if you go to a kokofu show, almost, you know, you're going to see a lot of beech. It's not like a random species that you're never going to see. It's an iconic deciduous tree species. Seems like there's a lot of potential for it.
No, absolutely. I think so too. I think most people are just scared by it. It's a little more intimidating, right? And maples tend to be, for some folks, or elms would be a little more easy, and you can cut them back numerous times. They're a little more forgiving.
Yeah,
I think
less finicky.
Right, less finicky. I think people are intimidated by the pinching and the maintenance associated with that.
Yeah, there's definitely less margin for error with beech. I mean, obviously a wire scar on a beech is going to be a lot more catastrophic than a wire scar on an elm, which can kind of get barky and kind of camouflage that a little bit more. Some of the work on elms are kind of notorious for being, you know, easy trees to work with.
Exactly.
Just because, you know, they're very predictable. They do everything you say. But it's not that beech aren't that, but they are just a little less tolerant of error, human error. But it's such a wonderful species. Now, you've collected what, a handful of them over the years, right?
Yeah, and they've always collected well, really well. The best beech I ever collected, someone bought off me. It's switched hands quite a few times. But I cut that with 0 roots. I mean, I had the flare, and I had all the large primary roots, but there were no hair roots on it. Yeah. And it recovered wonderfully. So they seem to be fairly tough.
Yeah, that's a big difference between conifers and deciduous that I've noticed is, you know, a lot of the deciduous trees I've collected here are come in with very few fine root, if any, and they always seem to bounce back better. I mean, they have so much stored energy in the trunk that they can overcome that in a way that a juniper probably won't. I mean, in your experience collecting junipers, if you don't have fine roots, do you ever?
Oh God, it's a rough go.
Okay. Yeah. But beech can handle that, and that makes kind of the collection a little bit easier. So talk me through collecting beech. Like you said, we talked about stumping them a little bit. So what are you looking for? Are you just looking for, you know, as you're walking through, looking for beech to collect? What are some of the things, if you're scouting different sites, what are you kind of, what's going through your head?
Well, when I'm scouting, I'm looking for obviously good root flare.
Yeah.
And if I can get symmetry on all sides as close as I can. Yeah. That's the first thing I look for. And then beyond that, of course, I don't want reverse taper or inverse taper. So I look for that. I look for that first initial, maybe I can get one branch, and then what's my next top? And that's what I'm looking. Where can I start my apex out of? And that's all I'm going for. Occasionally, I have found trees that were very far off from actually being bonsai. It's very rare it happens, but sometimes you come across one with nice root flare, fairly good taper, and very good branching, and you can just cut it back and reset it. Yeah. And start. Trees I wouldn't collect would be, beech is notorious for this. They have these, they come up from the roots, they sucker. So you have this massive tree, and you'll just see a line wherever the roots are of that massive tree, just shooting up these long suckers, and some people want to collect those. Some of them look
like
cool.
a raft-ish kind of
Yeah, and some of them are very attractive looking rafts.
But most of them probably aren't.
Most of them are not.
Because they're
Correct.
probably just a straight line of like
Correct.
uninteresting.
Correct. Occasionally you'll get that root, and then there will be offshoots of a root, and each one of those offshoots will have trees coming up, small trees coming up with that. If you can collect that successfully, then you might have something interesting, but usually you don't get that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So, and we talked about different types of trees that you can collect. And that's one of the fun things about beech and deciduous bonsai is that there's not like one recipe or formula. You know, you can collect these stumpy trees that we talked about that, you know, you're obviously going for like a big trunk, kind of formal-ish upright when you make the tree, nice flared base. But then, you know, I have a tree in the garden that we were talking about. It's like a triple trunk, kind of elegant, more elegant, kind of foresty kind of tree. You talked about finding one. Tell me the story. You found one that was actually very bonsai-like, had a lot of ramification. And
I was driving down the road, and I looked up a hillside, and it looked like an old rock quarry. And it was down a private road. It looked like in the middle of nowhere. And so I drove down there, and I saw that there were beeches, and I walked up to the hillside, and I found this tree that was almost already a bonsai, which is very surprising.
Which is not common for deciduous. Like you see that when you're out collecting junipers, like things that look like bonsai, they just need some wire. But
yes,
but for deciduous, that's not.
Yeah,
that's not what we.
It had wonderful root flare, great taper, branches coming out at good places, and I just immediately said, "Oh man, I got to get this tree." So I went and I got my tools and I came back. But you can find trees
like once in a blue. Like you're not. It's not going to be the standard or the norm, but like occasionally you might find something that.
Yeah, if you walk past, which isn't hard to do, 100,000 trees, you're going to find like one.
One that
like that
is exactly what you're looking for. Most of the time when we're collecting deciduous trees, we're looking for something that's not looking like a bonsai whatsoever. And we, through our technique and chopping and whatnot, we have to kind of make it look like that. Right. But what do you think is the benefit of collecting deciduous? Like why collect a beech rather than just grow one from a little seedling or sapling?
I mean, you're just starting with so much character. You know, you're getting a little piece of the world. You're taking a little piece of the world home, and then you're having a relationship with it versus starting this baby and growing with it. And there's nothing wrong with growing things from seedling and making wonderful bonsai. And matter of fact, I really respect that, people who can do that. But not always. In some cases, the material looks very domesticated. Mm-hmm. When you collect from the wild, you get a lot of character immediately, and there's just something about that. There's a taste that later on you get to savor.
Yeah,
I guess is the way I look
at
it.
Yeah. I think of it too. It's like a massive head start. Like maybe grow the seedlings on the side, but while those are taking 15 plus years to look interesting, have a big trunk that you can start building branches on rather than just building the trunk, which is a totally different kind of set of techniques and experiences. It gives you a nice opportunity to learn what building branches, building ramification, doing all that. And if the tree has some character that you seldom to find from growing anyway, then it adds that kind of unique benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you made a good point there. Actually, it gives you such a head start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking just about the character alone, but yeah, the head start it gives you, you're not going to get that in a pot.
Yeah. I have to tell a story. There's a tree that I recently acquired from Julian Adams, who's a kind of longtime bonsai guru down in Virginia, and he collected a beech tree on his property probably, I think, 20, 30 years ago, an American beech. Just like what you said, it was kind of like a stump kind of job where, it had a nice flared base, it had a nice kind of big trunk, but, everything else above that was kind of not useful. It was just a big, tall tree. And so he cut it, 2 feet from the soil line. He grew up a new trunk line to build some taper into the tree. And, 20 years later, it won an award at the Winter Silhouette Show down in Kannapolis. And it's just a really, really beautiful tree. It's sitting at a client's house. It hasn't made its way all the way across West just yet. I'm very eager to get it in the garden. But he just did a wonderful job with this tree. When I came across the tree, he had it for sale on his website for a long time, and I was just shocked that nobody was buying it. And I finally said, okay, I'll figure out a way to get it from Virginia to Portland.
Yeah.
This is too good of a tree to just let sit on that website, especially with such a good lineage and from a big bonsai person down there. But it's just a really wonderful example of what you can do with a collected tree. And the thing is, it kind of, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it kind of doesn't feel like a collected tree anymore because it's been in a bonsai pot for 20, 30 years. It feels like it was kind of grown. Like you can't see where the trunk was chopped anymore. Like the scar's healed over. It's been so long that the scar's starting to fade. He did a really good job building some like fundamental branching and a good silhouette that I can now build off of.
Yeah.
But it just kind of opened my eyes to, oh my gosh, there's such opportunity out there for beech bonsai in things that people are not really recognizing or not recognizing in a large degree.
Yeah, and I can't think of a better species also for forests. You know,
Yeah.
oh my God, they're so beautiful. I mean, the bark alone has almost that elephant-like skin kind of
It's
feel.
gorgeous. Yeah, it's that really smooth silver bark. You know, there's a reason people carve their names into beech. It's 'cause,
Yeah.
like it's just such a beautiful texture, and that scar will last forever, which is why
It's a bitch,
name.
yeah.
But no, it's just such a stunning species. And like you said, forests. If you go back and look at older kokofu books, almost all the forests that you'll see, or the majority of them, I would say, are beech. Now the majority of the forests that you see in Japan are trident maples, but in kind of the older school Japan, they really liked beech forests, and there's some incredibly good examples in those old books, stuff that looks just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Even today. Oftentimes you look back in those old books and the trees, some trees you say, oh, that looks kind of goofy compared to modern standards, but the beech forest really holds
And
up.
I don't know why, but the mixed forest, the old mixed forest examples look great with beeches.
They
Beeches
do,
and
yeah.
pines.
Sometimes they'll put like an azo spruce in there with
Right.
the beeches, or I've even seen like beeches off in like one quarter of the pot, and then a bunch of empty space, and then a suiseki planted in the pot.
Yeah.
Just really kind of more poetic expressions of bonsai art. And beech just really yield themselves to that.
I love that they hold their leaves too. There's something poetic about that too.
Yeah, they call that marcescence. So the leaf doesn't form an abscission layer in the fall like every other deciduous tree. There's a few theories on why beech do that. So beech are like the dominant species in the forest. And so one of the ways they think that beech take over and dominate, I mean, it took over the entire continent of Europe at one point, was beech forest, and any other plants had a hard time competing. But the theory is why they hold their leaves is because in the spring, when all the saplings from all the other trees, the seeds have fallen off and start growing, the beech shed their leaves in the spring, then they kill off all the other competition and just kind of remain dominant. So it's a way for them to kind of...
How interesting is that?
Yeah, who knows if that's actually
Yeah.
true. But that's the theory.
I want to believe it so bad.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, let's just, for the sake of this podcast, let's just believe it. But
I'm
no,
all in.
they're like it's one of the trees too that has really a great sense of longevity. A lot of deciduous species, compared to like the junipers that you collect,
Right.
they don't have long lives in the native environment. But beech can live for 400 or 500, 600 years, no problem if they're not undisturbed by us humans.
Yes.
So it's such a great forest tree, and that's something that we talked about too. Is in the collecting that we're planning on doing together is not just collecting those trees that we're going to stump and make these powerful kind of formal upright trees, but also collect some stuff for forests. Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, I found a really great spot, and it's very open, lots of sunlight. It looks like deer grazed, and the trees are very ramified.
Yeah,
So
they're like really skinny and tall, and
real skinny and tall, but lots of branching. Usually when they're that young, there's not much really on the tree
Yeah.
in terms of branching, but these are so very well branched. So I'm really looking forward to that, collecting a bunch and creating a bunch of forest plantings. I'm really excited about that.
that's going to be fun. I love forests. I have a lot of forests here in the garden, and I think, like we said, it's a species that's known. Like when you think of like you don't think of a Stewartia forest. Like I don't.
No.
That's more of like an idealized kind of thing that we would like to see.
Although you have one back there, which I really like.
Yeah, we have them here in the garden. You see
Yeah.
them in Kokofu books, but like it's not like true to the native environment.
Yes,
they're
I see.
understory trees in another dominant forest. But the cool thing about a beech forest is like that is really, you know, beech forests used to be all over North America. In fact, we actually had you can find beech fossils in eastern Oregon here.
Oh.
It took over all of North America at one point.
Oh, if I could go back.
Yeah, it'd be crazy. But no, it's really true. Having a beech forest bonsai is really true to form and how they actually grow in the wild.
I think it's attractive. Just anyone who's ever walked through a beech forest, they're going to get it. They're going to go,
they'll get it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'll get it. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's magical.
What I also like about forests too is that, especially for people who are just beginning, you can get really creative. You feel like you can be very creative.
Yeah.
Versus working with one tree, you're like, okay, I'm going to cut this down to this branch and wire this out, and okay, what's next?
Yeah.
This is an opportunity to
Yeah,
really create a composition.
It's another
right?
level of artistic capability that you can put in with these trees.
Right.
The thing I like about it too is it's like if you think about like this American beech behind us, like it's one trunk in a pot, right? To get all of the branching to occupy the space that one pot has, that takes a lot of years. Versus if I put 15 trees in that pot, that's going to take a lot less time to fill up that container and make it feel full and meaningful. So you can actually have a bonsai that kind of gets to the finish line a little bit sooner with the forest, just because you have so much more contributing to the overall kind of space that you're trying to fill, the silhouette.
Right.
So that kind of makes it fun. It saves time. It's more creative. It's a fun expression. Yeah, I think we'll make some really interesting forests.
I'm pumped. I can't wait to do this.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And you actually have some experience on a lot of your conifers when I was there at Bonsai Forge. Something that struck me was you've actually made some really interesting containers yourself. I know you maybe don't think too highly of them as I do, but you did some kind of like sculpting with, what was it, cement?
I did not expect you to bring this up. Cool. Yeah, I'm harsh on myself about it. I feel like they're a little too heavy right now, and I haven't quite got the look I'm going for yet.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
But it didn't look like you just like slapped some cement down in an organic shape and voila, you have a pot. Like you and maybe we should talk about this too. You're an artist. Your background is art, and so you took that kind of artistic sense to making this. What is concrete, right?
Yeah, I used concrete. I used cementol concrete, and I used some galvanized lath, like you'd use, say, like for a wall,
Okay.
to hold plaster.
Yeah.
Because it'll never rust. And I used that lath as a form to
Okay.
get the shape I was after, and then I coated it with the cementol concrete.
Yeah.
And what's great about the cementol is that it chemically bonds.
Okay.
It's not just a mechanical bond.
Okay.
So you can put on like very paper thin layers over time. It's just going to keep on bonding.
Yeah.
Whereas you can't usually do that with mortar or concrete. But anyway, I had what happened really is I collect these trees from out west. They're just unusual. Mm-hmm. They're weird, and it's hard to put them in a traditional pot.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of started this mission of making these containers that kind of fit these odd trees in a way that doesn't look contrived. So that's my goal. That's what I'm going for. So thank you for. I'm shocked that you like them, honestly. It's different stuff I'm doing. But.
Yeah, it's just like a cool, even if there's some refining to do, it's just like a cool approach. And I think we're going to have to employ that for some of these big forests that we're going to be making.
Oh, that's
Bonsai
a great
Forge.
idea.
Because we're probably going to be making things bigger than we can find pots for. So you might have to refine those skills a little bit more.
No pressure, right?
No pressure. But yeah, it's just a way to kind of have these natural forests in kind of a natural tray rather than ceramic pot. Not that there's anything wrong with a ceramic pot, but for the size, the practicality,
Absolutely.
We might need some interesting containers.
I think some trees just need, in my opinion, need something a little extra, and that's what I'm after. Trying to find that little extra something that suits the tree.
Yeah.
But I love traditional containers. Man, you have some containers here I've been eyeing up. I love. I love your collection here of
Thank you.
containers. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard having a big deciduous garden because the standard default for a deciduous tree is a glazed oval. So
Yeah.
how do you have a
Yeah.
garden that's diversified and interesting without just having all blue glazed ovals?
Right.
So trying to get different, like one of the things I love about now Tokatake's pots is like, this is a glazed oval, but it's got a more interesting glaze. He's got this kiln influenced, red that's kind of lighting on fire on top of a green kind of pot. And then he does this like step down thing where it's like there's like two levels to the. I'm not even good at articulating this, but it's just a standard deviation or two away from your typical glazed oval that it kind of keeps it exciting without just being too monotonous here in the garden.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how he pulled this off. He has that much color in a pot, and it's not loud, obnoxious. It's calm.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
calm. It's beautiful. It's sophisticated. I love this container.
Yeah, it works with this beech really nicely, and
Yeah.
I actually think that green and these copper marcescent leaves are really beautiful kind of combo too. It's kind of fun. But yeah, I'm excited about American Beech. Like this tree, I've been putting a lot of effort into ramifying the last few years, and I mean, it's even if it ends up being slightly more coarse than Japanese or European beech, it's still not a bad tree. Like you can make beautiful bonsai with it, and if you can just walk out in the woods and collect something and have a good head start, then what? Yeah, I don't know why more people aren't.
I mean,
playing with it.
I do believe the best trees are art, and we're trying to make art, and I'm not going to judge art by the shape, the size of the leaves, right? I'm after art. I'm not, and I know it's like.
Yeah, what do you do with those big leaves? That's the interesting thing.
Absolutely,
the coarser
yeah.
tree.
And wisteria, I love wisteria. Those leaf sizes aren't proportion but it's just gorgeous. You look at it and you have all the elegance and the flowers, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't get caught up on leaf size either, especially if we're going to enjoy it in the winter and when the leaves do eventually fall off. I know the beech hold it, but
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in beech bonsai, we're going to be starting to collect a lot together, and we don't know what we're going to do with these yet. I imagine a lot of some of them are going to come out west, and I'll have them here for sale and for workshops here at RAKUYO Bonsai. I think we'll have sales and workshops out at Bonsai Forge for people who are looking for beech. So if you're on either coast, you have a good opportunity, or we can drop one off to you somewhere in the middle. But yeah, it's going to be fun to kind of put some curriculum to this species and be able to provide, with you finding and having great sources of material and me bringing all my passion for beech. It's going to be fun to kind of merge those two worlds together.
I'm super excited.
And make some good bonsai in the future. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to having you.
Other deciduous trees out by you. So we talked a lot about beech, which is what we're going to kind of heavily invest some energy into the next few years. We talked about American Elm, which you can find some great trunks and do some nice things with that, as Suthin and you have demonstrated with good trees. Are there other deciduous species as you walk around the woods in the eastern U.S. that you're kind of fascinated thinking of for collecting? Anything that's kind of tempting you?
Well, I have a challenging one. I love oak trees. Who doesn't love seeing a big spreading oak in a farm field somewhere? They're just magnificent. So I'm on the hunt for some good oak trunks.
That gets me excited too. I like oaks.
And they feel similar to beeches.
Yeah. Really dominant, long-lived deciduous forests. I mean, like the oak is the king of the forest, the beech is a queen. Like they are the two long-lived trees that just take over an entire woods and have really strong forms, but they're still quiet deciduous trees at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested in primarily white oaks.
Okay.
And I'm actually kind of interested in collecting some decent trunks, and I have a bunch of mature white oaks on my property that throw tons of acorns down every year.
Yeah.
So I'm kicking around the idea of grafting that foliage onto.
Interesting. Yeah.
To get acorns. I'd love to get acorns on a bonsai.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
That'd be cool.
So that's something I'm kicking around the idea of doing. I'm excited about that.
I wonder how old an oak has to be to fruit. I know beech. I've never seen a beech bonsai flower or fruit to get the beech nuts. Beech have to be like 70, 80 years old in order to be kind of sexually mature for that. And,
Yes.
and we just don't see a lot of 70-year-old beech bonsai in existence, especially this side of the
Right.
Pacific.
Oaks take a really long time. I've looked this up quite a bit, and it seems to be like, 50 years.
Okay.
Where probably on is when
Yeah.
you're going to start.
So you'd have to collect a pretty old tree in order to.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But it'd be cool.
It'd be
Like,
cool.
Yeah, it'd be
cool.
super cool. I wonder if
Yeah.
the squirrels would be more problematic with oak bonsai.
Yeah, right.
I need a few more traps out.
Exactly. Those I'm into oaks for sure. Trying to collect those. Red maples are a good choice too. Our native reds on Easter are a good choice.
Acer rubrum red maple is a phenomenal tree for bonsai. It's we were just at Michael Hegedorn's garden, my teacher, earlier this morning, and at the Pacific Bonsai Expo a few weeks ago, he had a red maple Acer rubrum on display, and it's probably the best Acer rubrum that I know of as a bonsai. It's a tree that Ann Spencer here in Portland grew for 30 years in a bonsai pot from a 5-year-old seedling, and now it looks like a kokafu tree. It's not a big tree, so I think a lot of people maybe walked past it at the expo just because there's so many other big in-your-face trees in the room, but it's such a special little tree, and it's like what a good example of what you can do with that species.
Absolutely, I love that tree. It's always one of the favorites in his garden.
Yeah.
Species I wouldn't work on. Can we do this? Can we touch this
Yeah.
topic?
What species would you avoid? And why?
They're so tempting to collect. And I feel bad to discourage people because I've collected quite a few, and they're awesome looking trunks. Are native hawthorns in the east?
Native hawthorn. So say more. Why are you not a fan of native hawthorn?
And maybe someone else has had great. I have seen a few that are very nice, but every time I collect them, they just don't respond well vigorously. They survive, but I've never seen them just like blow up over time and get more and more powerful, and then I'm cutting back and I'm getting ramification. I don't ever get that. I get them just hanging out. I'm not very happy that they're in a container.
Interesting. So like unlike the beech or the elms that you've collected that are just like ready to go, like let's build some branches, like they're just kind of unhappy and slow and.
Yeah, I have. When I moved to my property 3 years ago, I collected some immediately because they were on the edge of the field there. Very nice muscular trunks, and they're not loving their life, and I don't get it. I fertilize well, all that stuff. I have seen a couple of examples in the national show of a couple of nice ones. I've seen them. But my experience is that I haven't had luck with them.
Well, and that's so Dennis Wojtyla won the national show a couple years ago with or Best Deciduous with a what type of hawthorn is it? Blanking on the name. A Washington hawthorn.
Yeah, I've heard those are good.
And I think that species of hawthorn tends to be better. But I've also known like the hawthorn that we have here in Eastern Oregon or Idaho is notoriously difficult once it's collected. I've heard hawthorns on New England are notoriously difficult once they're collected.
Yeah.
So for me, is like if you're going to collect one, it better have like the best trunk that you've ever seen. If it's going to be like a pain in the butt to work with because it might just not be fun.
I've even cut them down before I've collected them to come back to collect them, waited a few years, and they've died back substantially, and I didn't want to collect them.
Yeah, it's just not as sustainable as a species, I think, as other things, at least the ones that we're talking about. Yeah. The other thing I've never really cared for about them is, for one, the thorns, which you can cut off, and there's a way to get around that. But two, like the flowers, like, they're fine, but like they have that musky smell, which is not like the most appetizing.
You're being kind.
If I'm going to have a flowering tree that gets some fruit, like I might as well have a crab apple that's still going to have a nice flower, but maybe smell better, and have a fruit that's on a tree that's not going to be fighting me versus.
Right. It smells like cat urine.
It's a horrible. It's a horrible smell.
It's a horrible smell. Yeah, I totally agree.
So what else? What else would you avoid? What would you not collect?
I like our ironwood, our American hornbeams are fine, but the hop hornbeam I've had, and my friends who've also collected them have not had great luck with them. Okay. Have you ever tried hop hornbeam?
I've worked on a couple on my travels, but I've never had one in the garden, never collected one. I know a lot of people collect of American Hornbeam, but I haven't heard of much with Hop Hornbeam.
Yeah,
What have you heard?
I've collected quite a few, and I've had friends, maybe 10 years, 12 years ago when I moved back to Pittsburgh area, I decided to go collect a bunch of trees, and I collected a lot of the hop hornbeams because they have some nice movement coming out of the ground usually.
Yeah.
But man, they open up post-collection, they open up and they just kind of hang out, and then the next year goes by and they grow a little bit and they just kind of hang out, and they don't have the same vigor as the American.
Gotcha. So it's the same kind of feeling, just it's going to fight you more in a bonsai pot.
It's going to be very slow, very slow process.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize about Japan is like Japan has thousands of beautiful plant species, and they've over time as a bonsai kind of community and culture kind of whittled them down to stuff that's either culturally significant or works really, really well for bonsai. And just because we have it in their woods doesn't mean it's gonna be a good time when it's in a bonsai pot. And that's what I think we need to we're still trying to work and figure out. But I mean, species that we've talked about like beech, like American elm, like red maple, there's some proven kind of track record.
Absolutely proven.
Which is fun. It makes investing and collecting a bunch of beech really exciting because we know there's a good path kind of forward. Now you brought up, I know we're talking about some things we maybe don't like, but let's diverge for a minute and talk about American hornbeam, because that's a great species for...
Absolutely.
Do you have them in the woods near you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you've collected a few?
I've collected a few, and they've responded pretty well.
Okay.
I don't have any currently. Since I moved and I had to get rid of them, but I had very good luck with them.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few American hornbeam in the garden. I've worked on several on my travels. Everyone that I know who has them loves them, says they're great. They respond really well. If you can find some nice trunks, they look great. A lot of people are doing that kind of stumping technique with them, where they're cutting them 2-3 feet from the soil, get a nice base, nice kind of start to the tree, and use that.
If you look them up in a book, one of the words to describe it, they're called musclewood is another one of them. Yeah. And you just look at that and you go, oh my gosh, yeah, they're so muscular and they have so much character on their own. That's why I love them, because they have their own look. Whereas some other species you might collect, the only difference you can quite notice maybe sometimes is just the bark itself. Oh, the bark is different. But they have that kind of extra X factor that makes them special. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, those are fun. Any other species that you're kind of excited, deciduous-wise, in the woods near you that you're either like or don't like or have thought about?
I've thought this spring I might get out and collect a bunch of apples.
Apples?
Crab apples.
Fun. Crab apples?
Yeah, crab apples.
Okay.
There is just so many in Pennsylvania, growing wild everywhere. If you take a walk in the forest, you're going to find apple trees.
Interesting.
From the birds,
Yeah. How big are they more like marble size, or are they smaller like?
You can get them all different. You never see them full like grocery store size.
Okay.
But you will see ones that are, I don't know, twice the size of a golf ball.
Yeah.
Down to like pea size.
Yeah.
Because it's whatever's been planted in, say, shopping malls.
Okay.
The ornate kind, right? The birds come and they eat them, and then they spread the seeds around. And then you have farms that once existed, and then they got kind of spread, and then they propagated. And
Now, something people talk about when collecting deciduous trees, going back to that farm thing, is these like pasture kind of pruned. Like there's a crab apple and a pasture, and cows come nibble it back, and you have this kind of ready to go bonsai.
Yeah.
Do you come across those much?
None of them that look that great.
Okay.
Some of them can look good, but often you get something like, if I was to come by randomly with and just hedge down something over and over again, it might be well ramified and have a bunch of branching, but it might not be the great form. Right? But every once in a while you come across something that's interesting. We'll call it interesting. That would be worth collecting.
Yeah.
Just because it has interest. Does that
Okay.
make any sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, neat. But I think that's when a lot of people think of collecting deciduous bonsai, that's what they think of, is finding something that is kind of chewed down and set to go. And it's not that that's not a viable path, but in the collecting pursuits that we're going to be doing together, that's very different image than what we're going to be finding looking for the beech.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, neat. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to what we're going to be doing with these beech trees. And if you're interested in getting some beech Yamadori from us, keep an eye out on Bonsai Forge and RAKUYO Bonsai. We don't have a solid plan for that yet. We're just going out on our first trip this coming spring. But yeah, we hope to kind of fill that gap in the market of being able to provide some good deciduous Yamadori for people who can get that head start and start playing with the species, and maybe having some workshops here and in Pennsylvania kind of along the way. What are you looking forward to at Bonsai Forge? Like, what's the Pittsburgh bonsai community like? Like, you mentioned you're looking to have kind of a nice hub for bonsai out there. Say more about kind of where you're headed with your nursery and garden. If you're interested in conifer Yamadori, you're a great collector of conifer Yamadori, so you have a lot of great material for sale out there.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about Bonsai Forge while we wrap up.
Okay, yeah. So I just basically want to create exactly what you said, a hub for folks to come and to learn how to do quality bonsai from quality artists. Thanks for coming out. And so I just want to be a resource. I do have pots and tools and wire, but I also have a great selection of Yamadori. Right now I'm heavy on Western junipers, but I also have lodgepole pine, I have ponderosa pine, I have Engelmann spruce, I have subalpine fir. I have a lot of stuff out there.
Soon to be American Beech.
Soon to be American Beech. But I do want to not just be the conifer, Yamadori conifer stop for everyone.
Yeah.
I do want to start getting more deciduous material out there. I do have a growing field that I started 2 years ago. It's in process. So I'm hoping 5 to 7 years I have some really nice material. I'd love for you to work with me on that.
Yeah. No, that'd be really fun.
Going.
And like we said, I'm going to be out there regularly with a deciduous study group. So if you're in the kind of northeast area and you're a few hours of drive away, you come out to Pittsburgh, because we'll be starting a deciduous study group out there to teach some classes and kind of build some nice deciduous trees out in that community too.
Yeah.
So, I'm really looking forward to it. I was out at your place. I was really impressed with the garden that you built. You have tell us a little bit about your property too. Like you got an old property. You have really unique buildings. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So when I moved I used to live in Idaho. I was originally a Pittsburgh native. Moved out west for 4 years, and then decided to move back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we were looking for a property to start a bonsai nursery. But I wanted to be close to the Pittsburgh area, and we passed on a bunch of nicer houses. But we came across this property that just had so much character. It's an old farmstead originally, part of an old farmstead, and it has an old forge building there. The old timer that lived there actually forged metal components in there for wells in there.
Is this where the name Bonsai Forge comes from?
And this is where the name Bonsai Forge comes from, yeah. Okay. So it kind of just made sense. It hit me one day. I said, what am I going to call this business,
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm an old forge, Bonsai Forge. I'm using it as my studio. Forging relationships, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Pittsburgh is known as a steel city.
Absolutely.
Now you have the tie-in from Nippon Steel.
Yeah. So I've tried to embrace that at the nursery. And so instead of trying to modernize it and make it look like a new building, I'm embracing the old, right? I'm just making sure it's clean and trying to play it up a bit in places.
Yeah.
And so this last summer, I added a workshop space. And I have a half barn across the way, which I'm currently turning into the retail shop aspect of it.
Nice.
And my bonsai display area. So it's a work in progress. Next year, I'd also like to add the much needed greenhouse.
Yeah.
I've got a lot on my plate.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that come out that study with me, like, are we going to do bonsai more? I said, yeah, I need to get this work done now.
Yeah.
So it's been a work in progress, but every time, what I can tell you is every time folks come out to the nursery, it's going to get better and better. And I think I'm going to create a really awesome experience for folks.
Nice. I'm excited to build a relationship together, making some nice trees, collecting some fun beech, and it's when I was out there, I was so impressed with what you built and community that you're building and all the great people that are out there. It's really exciting to see these little epicenters for bonsai starting to pop up all around the country, because even if you're like 2 hours away in the middle of Pennsylvania, like where do you go to learn bonsai at a high level? Like you need places like this to exist. Not everybody can fly to Portland and take an intensive class here. It's nice to have offerings at places all around the country, and I'm really excited about what you're doing.
Thank you. And I think this, right, what you're talking about is what ups the level. You know, people are going to get better and better by doing this, creating community-based places where people can learn. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Dan, for coming on the podcast. You've been watching Rakuyo's Deciduous Bonsai podcast. I'm Andrew Robson, an apprentice bonsai professional here in Portland, Oregon. My studio is RAKUYO Bonsai, and it was a pleasure, Dan, to have you on today and talk about collecting deciduous trees. So.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.